The Valeth Empire had stood for 40,000 years, spanning 700 star systems and encompassing 212 sentient species. In all that time, across all those worlds, the Chamber of Whispers on Station Terminus 7 had remained sealed. Not locked. Sealed. The difference was crucial. A lock implied a mechanism, a key, a solution. The Chamber of Whispers simply rejected entry. Every species that approached its obsidian doors experienced the same phenomenon. A crushing weight upon their consciousness. Whispers that spoke of their deepest failures. Visions of futures where everything they loved turned to ash. The Krell, with their four-lobed brains and psionic resistance, had lasted 7 seconds. The cybernetic Zarn, who had replaced 90% of their neural tissue with quantum processors, managed 4. The records were extensive and consistent. No one entered the chamber. Matthew Torres didn't know any of this when he pushed his cleaning cart down Corridor 7 Beta on Tuesday morning. He didn't know because he'd only been working at Terminus 7 for 3 weeks, and his supervisor, a perpetually exhausted Drexian named Kolthor, had simply pointed at a map and said, "Clean everything marked in yellow." Corridor 7 Beta was marked in yellow. Matthew had his earbuds in, listening to an old Earth podcast about conspiracy theories. In his left hand, he held a tuna sandwich that Lisa from the cafeteria had made for him. She always added extra pickles the way he liked. In his right hand, he pushed the cart, its wheels squeaking in rhythm with his steps. The obsidian doors appeared around the corner, massive and imposing, covered in symbols that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Matthew barely glanced at them. He'd seen plenty of weird alien architecture in his 3 weeks. Everything looked weird when you were 12,000 light-years from home. He took a bite of his sandwich and approached the doors. In the station's command center, alarms erupted. Commander Jarix's crest flared in shock. "Impossible! Something is approaching the chamber!" "Scanning now," her tactical officer reported, all 6 of his hands dancing across holographic displays. Commander, it's the human, the janitor. Stop him immediately." "We're trying, but the door controls are on manual lockout. By the time we route through..." On the monitors, they watched Matthew reach for the door's handle, still chewing his sandwich. The doors opened. They swung inward smoothly, silently, as if they'd been waiting. Matthew stepped through, glancing around with mild interest. Inside, the chamber was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 30 feet across, circular, with walls covered in the same shifting symbols. In the center stood a pedestal, and on that pedestal sat a perfectly spherical object that glowed with a soft, pulsing light. "Huh," Matthew said around his sandwich. "That's pretty." Behind him, the doors remained open. In 40,000 years, they'd never done that. Commander Jarix was already running down the corridor, followed by her entire command staff and 3 security squads. They arrived breathless, weapons drawn, prepared for catastrophe. Matthew stood in the center of the chamber, examining the sphere. He'd finished his sandwich and was wiping his hands on his coveralls. The whispers that had driven species mad swirled around him like curious butterflies. "Oh, hey," Matthew said, noticing the crowd. "Is this area off-limits? Nobody told me. Sorry." "How—" Jarix couldn't form the question. "How are you in there?" "I walked." Matthew gestured at his legs, confused. The door was unlocked. "The whispers?" the tactical officer breathed. "Can't you hear them?" Matthew tilted his head. "You mean that humming sound?" "Yeah, it's a little annoying. Kind of like tinnitus." He tapped his ear. "I've had that since the concert in '98. You get used to it." Lisa appeared at the back of the crowd, having heard the commotion. She pushed through to the front, her eyes widening when she saw Matthew standing casually in the chamber that had been the station's greatest mystery. "Matthew! What are you doing?" "My job?" He gestured at his cart. Kolthor said to clean the yellow sections. Is this not a yellow section? The sphere on the pedestal pulsed brighter. Jarex's sensors were going haywire. That artifact, she said slowly, has been attempting to communicate for 40,000 years. Every species that entered either went mad or died. How are you just standing there? Matthew shrugged. I mean, it's definitely trying to show me something. Lots of images of, like, wars and stuff ending, people sad. But I figured it was just tired of being locked up in here. I get it. My apartment back on Earth didn't have windows. Really messes with your head. It's showing you the heat death of the universe, Jarex corrected. The futility of all existence. The meaninglessness of struggle. Oh. Matthew considered this. That's pretty dark. But we all know that already, right? Everything ends eventually. That's why you make the most of the time you have. Try to be decent to people. Eat good sandwiches. He smiled at Lisa. Thanks again, by the way. The extra pickles really make a difference. Lisa laughed, despite herself. You're insane. The sphere pulsed once more, then dimmed. The whispers faded. Something in the chamber's atmosphere changed, a tension releasing, like a long-held breath finally exhaled. It's powering down, the tactical officer reported in disbelief. The psionic field is collapsing. Matthew walked back toward the doors, pushing his cart. So am I good to clean in here, or is this still restricted? Commander Jarek stared at him. In her 15 years commanding Terminus 7, she'd never been so thoroughly confused. How? She asked again. How can you resist what broke entire civilizations? Matthew paused, genuinely thinking about it. I guess... He glanced at Lisa, then back at the commander. I guess humans learned a long time ago that existence doesn't have to mean something big to be worth living. We're good at finding meaning in small things. A good sandwich, a friend who remembers how you like your food, a weird humming noise that keeps you company while you work. He headed down the corridor, whistling. Behind him, the Chamber of Whispers sat open and empty, its 40,000-year vigil ended by a man who'd simply refused to be impressed by existential dread. Lisa caught up with Matthew at the next corridor. You know you're going to be famous now, right? First being to ever enter the chamber. Matthew grinned. Does that mean I get a better parking spot? Probably not. Then I'll settle for another sandwich tomorrow, same way you made it. Deal.